Hey, Redcasters, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. Go Big Red.
Welcome to the Go Big Redcast, the Husker Fan Sports Show.
With Honky.
Well, we're 17 days out, and Howard Griffin today said that we have the best quarterback room, or one of the best ones that he's seen in the Big Ten. So I'll take that as a good sign.
Howard Griffith said that? Really?
He just said that tonight on BTN. It's one of the best quarterback rooms he's seen so far. So there, 17 days.
One of the best. That old sage, Howard Griffith. All right. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. Also with Boomer.
Well, I'm just excited to hear the soon announcement of our Go Big Redcast line of yellow shirts and hats. I hear Husker fans are really into that color, and it'll be a good choice for coaches and players alike.
All right. Also with Redcast, Rob.
Well, Boomer, speaking of yellow hats, I will be wearing a yellow hat on the field this year for the UTEP game and the Northern Iowa game, which I have received on-field media passes for. I think actually the more valuable thing there is the parking pass that I got as well. So I will be covering both of those games somehow. I am going to try and not get divorced by going to 3 Husker games in a row at home in Lincoln, 3 weekends in a row.
I'm just hoping they don't throw us out after what happened last time we were media at a game.
Oh, well, yeah, that's not true, because last time we were media at a game was when I went to the Rutgers game and we won that game.
Oh, that's true. So yeah, that's good.
And we also won the spring game when I was there.
Well, you're 2-0 then, Rob. Thank goodness.
That's right. Abby just that look on Abby's face when I said that.
And our newest member, Redcast, Abby's with us.
Hi, yeah, 9 days to the volleyball red and white scrimmage. So kicking off women's sports in just over a week.
Excellent. We're going to hear more about all of that coming up. We have a lot of new material with our newest member. So we'll get there. But Honky, let's talk about what's fresh and new, and that is the BTN crew was in town today and gave us their thoughts on what the spring camp or fall camp looks like. What were your initial takes on Howard Griffith and company?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive. I think that you can tell that they're coming in here and they're seeing something different from previous years. You can tell that they've bought in, or they're drinking some of the Kool-Aid of year 2 of Rule. The team looks good physically. There's a lot of depth. They talked about on the offensive line, even withstanding losing someone like Prohaska. What this line has from an experience standpoint, Ben Hart and Ben Scott, and then bringing Mazuka in, you have Corcoran back, you have Evans, Jenkins back, you have Lutovsky once he gets back full strength. There's a lot of guys that played a lot of snaps, even with Prohaska getting injured. Now, knock on wood, you can't just keep having season-ending injuries to guys. But the point is that there was some depth already, that they took care of the things they could control over the offseason. So they're in pretty good shape there. And I think that the BTN guys who have been, I looked at the list here before we started. And when Griffin said that Griffith said that that's one of the best QB rooms he's seen so far, he hasn't been to every one of these because I think some of the West Coast schools they didn't go to. But just to put it in perspective, right now, BTN tour's gone to Minnesota, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, Maryland, Penn State, Rutgers, Ohio State, Indiana, Purdue, UCLA, USC, and then they just got to Nebraska. They'll also be going to Iowa here next. I'm not sure if Iowa's going to change their thoughts on the QB or not.
That we can laugh about. But I'm guessing Griffith probably wasn't at Oregon or Ohio State with this QB comment thing, but sure, some of the other ones maybe.
Yeah, I don't know about Ohio State. I know he didn't go West Coast. And the other thing, the way that he said it to it, he talked about how it's one of the best QB rooms that I've seen on this tour. So isn't just limited to being only a Raiola statement, that really the room, and they focused a lot on the two young guys, Elite 11 QBs that are in the program, a lot of talent there. And then Harburg, the guy that went 5-2 last year, 7 games experience under his belt and coming into another off season. And I think also, just having Coach Thomas working with these guys, seeing that development with them, that it's becoming a pretty complete room. We'll see how it looks with the live bullets going around them.
Yeah, right. I mean, as complete as it may be, it's still young. So we'll see. Abby, I have to admit, we've seen kids on this show. We have seen Boomer, my dogs, randomly have making appearances. I think the first cat appearance on the show. If anybody's watching on YouTube,
that's not true.
What is your cat?
My cat has been on there. Creamsicle Tom Osborne.
I've never seen your cat. I was not on that show.
Yeah,
I'm thankful for it.
Well, you're welcome.
Creamsicle Tom Osborne as Rob's cat. But Abby, your cat's name is what?
This is Alfred.
Alfred.
Yeah. He was out of the room and then clawed his way in and is basically just a giant baby. So
Sounds
unfortunately, he'll leave at some point. We kind of let him do his thing right now. And
I'm more enthralled with him than Rob, so it's okay. Don't worry, Abby. I think you also saw the Big Ten Network show. Any thoughts on that?
It was good. I thought that. I mean, here's the thing: we know this year in and year out, we don't get much new from it. We all watch. Yeah. If you watch the press conferences, you see a lot of this stuff. Yep. But it's nice getting an outsider's kind of view of things, and I think. They're positive. They've been positive on us before, but the way that they talked about us feels, God help me, that I think it feels realistically positive this year.
Not just like pat on the back. Sure, we're going to tell you everything's going to be fine. Positive.
It doesn't quite feel like they're blowing smoke like they have maybe in the past. And they've said some things that the top of my head, I don't even know what day it is. I thought it was like Thursday all day, so I can't remember right off the top of my head what I thought was so impressive. But I feel like the way they talked about it was in a very safe, positive way of like, okay, we can believe some of this coming out of some of the things coming out of them. So hopefully.
Rob wants to add to the safe positive.
Well, I think to that point too, just to kind of emphasize it a little bit, was that the way that they were talking about it from the safe positive standpoint was that they really emphasized the amount of returning players that were coming back on the offense and defense. Right, there's 17 returning starters from last year, and 8 of those are on the defense. So we're looking at another 9 on the offensive side. And they were talking about, how even with the injuries, like Honky said, the offensive line still had enough depth on it where they feel like there's enough old guys coming back that can fill those spots, but there's also some new guys that are looking really good from their perspective watching the practices, right? Not just from what everybody's saying from a media or coaching standpoint. And then on the defensive side, there are a lot of young guys that we started to see from last year. Williams and even Shavers Jr., who's a true freshman this year, keeps getting his name brought up. And so I just feel like we're going to start seeing players like that out there. But just seeing that outside perspective of them talking about players that they saw on the field from like a neutral point of view, I suppose, normally in the past there'd be like, oh, we're going to have to really look and hope some of these players are able to grow throughout the season to get the Huskers where they need to be. And right now the attitude seems to be more like, I think this team is going to be exactly what we expect them to be, around like a bowl team at minimum, 8 to 10 wins, at most, or, you know what I mean, kind of team. So, and when Rule talked about being in the playoff hunt, they didn't snicker or laugh or smile. Like their body language was kind of like, there's a good chance you guys could be there halfway or more than halfway through the season. So, I mean, I guess it was some really positive like feedback, whether it was like from body language or verbally. It was nice.
Boomer, question for you. Self-positivity, is that a buzzword in last month's workplace training or a idea from a 18th century French philosopher?
It could be both, and it's probably some new management book that came out that everybody's been handed
Yeah,
by their
I think I'm reading it
supervisor to
right
read
now.
this week. So yeah, self-positivity, in 5 minutes. So
Self-positivity.
yeah, learn it around the office. But yeah,
What do you?
but yeah, there is
Simon
room for
Simon
positivity.
Sinek's most
Yeah.
recent book or something.
Exactly. Yep.
Boomer, this the positivity train here to Abby and Rob's point. I mean, it feels genuine, and we haven't seen what typically at the end of the run that used to be 12 and then 14 shows, and now it's 18 shows. They typically would give some sort of predictions on a top 6 or something like that, right? So that's the most Ruth term that Jerry Gennardo and Griffith takes is when they have to actually put in some sort of ranking. But we know that the preseason polls have us 7th or 8th or so, and we have been in that spot before, right? Frost's second year, we were preseason ranked, for God's sakes. I don't know why. I guess maybe it's because they had a lot of faith in Adrian, and maybe he's going to make the NFL roster this time. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I guess how do you feel about trying to balance this self positivity?
I think a lot of it comes from the coaching staff that we have. I think, the prior
That's
coaching
fair.
staff, the Big Ten media guys, they don't come straight out and just say, yeah, this team's going to suck, every year. They don't do that. There's always something good.
Not going to happen. Yep.
And DiNardo said good stuff about our teams in the past, regardless of who the coach was. But I think everybody that does speak about Nebraska, they know what Rule's done in the past at other programs. They've seen what White's defense can do. There's no reason to expect it to take a step back this year. So I think that's probably a big reason why, the positivity, whether it's self or, an outside locus here or something like that, I think feels a little more genuine. I think that's a term that we've heard already tonight. So I think it's just the fact that they believe that the staff can do it. And with what they see and the pieces they have, they should be able to. So I think that's why we're hearing that.
And to that, they kind of ended talking about, last year when they were here, they noticed that Matt Rule was actually coaching a lot more. He was on the field. He was much more active and kind of hands-on. And this time around, they saw a lot less of that, which to them, which maybe it's what we want. They know what we want to hear, but to them is people are buying in. They're, being much more player-led. The assistants know what's going on. So it's that idea that everybody's on the same page in a way that they weren't last year, which I found to be a really, that was never mentioned during the Frost era.
The players
probably because there's
self-knowing.
90 more coaches on the field right now. I mean, how many guys did they?
Everybody gets their own private coach now. So that's
But I think the idea there is you don't he doesn't need to instill the core values of the team. They've bought it. They seem to have at least bought in well enough to not need him to be constantly reminding them the way that maybe he was last year. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, the year 2, you always get a bump in year 2, which really goes back to 2019 with Frost. There's a year 2 bump that he got too. Now, we can snicker looking back and go, why was there so much hype at that time? And it was very national, but that was Frost coming off of a strong finish to year 1, winning 4 of the last 6. And in year 2 at UCF, he had demonstrated the ability to turn a team around, right? So we've talked a lot about Rule that same way, that he's had, he hasn't gone 12-0 in year 2, but he's had successful year 2s and 3s at places that he's been at. And that is one of the reasons why you would expect to have some of that success. It's also Rule being given the keys, so to speak, to a big program. They talked about that tonight at the BT, and sitting in the walkthrough room and just kind of looking around. Dave Rosine, I think, was like, geez, they had really good facilities already, and what we just walked through today is just incredible. And so, I think it's the same things that we've been talking about for months now, this entire offseason, and really since Rule was hired, was that this idea you're kind of pointing to year 2 that things are going to be in place. And I think it's this realization that people are sitting here now going, wow, the team does look pretty good. Wow, these facilities look pretty darn amazing. I mean, this looks like a big time football program. Oh, they haven't been to a bowl game for 7 straight years. Like something doesn't match up. They talked about with the defense with Tony White that there were, I think it was like 18 teams last year that had kept. I can't remember what the stat was. Abby, do you remember? Like they said, like there was 18 teams in the country that held somebody under. I don't know if it was under so many points a game.
It was 96 yards or something.
No. It was under 20 points. I think it was under 20 points a game, and it was like 18 teams did that. And 17 of them were like had 8 wins or more, and then you had
then there was us.
And then there was Nebraska.
It's just that's one microcosm of like so many different stats, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you walk in here and you see these facilities that just are matched by even the Georgias, the Tennessees, the Alabamas, they don't have some of the stuff that we have right now. And you go and you look at the team that we have, and these old guys in the trenches, and they look like pro athletes in terms of age and being big and powerful and all that. And all these things are coming together in year 2 of rule. Oh, and we haven't made a bowl in 7 years. And so can this be the year where it all comes together? I'll ask the question to you guys if you haven't seen the show. So Abby, you can't answer because you would have seen this, but they asked Coach Rule, how would you define success this year? Before you answer, Boomer, Rob, or Dave, did you hear or see his response to that?
I think you actually said it earlier.
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
you tweeted it.
That we want to be relevant.
No, that I tweeted that out. Yes. So, well, but that's. I guess that's a question though. Is how would you define success this year?
I mean, I think I like that approach. Really, to me, having exact win number like to measure success, whether we go 7-5, 8-4, 9-3. I don't know, right? But if we are relevant, that means in the season we are being talked about, that we are competitive in all these games, and at deep into the season they're talking about us, being there for bowl season and everything above it, right? So like I would just take that as relevancy, right? And I think that's where your first step back to being a legitimate program, a blue blood program, is to get that relevancy back, and that's been missing for probably longer than 7 years practically.
Well,
and he said that at media days too. Somebody asked him about, is it like 7 wins, is it 8 wins? And he said, I'm not going to put that because then that's saying we accept losses. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was and I think that goes along with it of like, don't put a ceiling on it. What's success? 7 wins. Well, that's saying that 4 losses is successful, and that's not. Which I think it goes to that idea of just like there's not a number. We're not going to be focused on that number because that's accepting losses as being successful, and we don't want to even go down that path.
Yeah, and I think he even said something in that answer, because I did hear it though, Honky, like when he was talking about it. I think, and I'm not quoting him exact, but he said something to the point of like he wants to be talked about in that playoff picture. Like part of that relevant thing is that at some point in the season he wants to be talked about as a team that could possibly make that 12-team playoff, right? So I mean, his philosophy goes along with the way that I fan in some ways, which is I believe we can win every game until we don't.
Yeah. But I guess I think, and I'm the more pragmatic fan, but it doesn't mean I can't be optimistic that we can have a great season. Honky, you had an interesting text thread. This is weeks ago now, and you actually had a poll out of like, out of our first 7 games, we are essentially predicted to finish higher than all of them. Is that right? In the Big Ten, Rutgers is the closest one at 10. I feel like it's a little bit low for Rutgers in my opinion, but that point is, you could argue that we should be favored in all 7 of those games, right? If you're on a gambling show, you look at, okay, what's your actual line, and we should be favored in all of those. So like, I think your statement was, and maybe where I took a little bit of question on it was like, there's no excuse for them not to go 6-1 or better. And I'm like, well, there's always excuses, right? But we don't want to hear those. But defining success out of the first 7 games is still being relevant when you play the 8th, in my opinion, right? And if we're 6-1 and if we're up against is 8th game Ohio State, is that right?
The 8th game's Ohio State,
right? And we're talking about being, I don't know if we're gonna what the line would be on that game or anything like that, but it's like look, if we seem to be relevant in the national eye at that point, that's a success. Could that happen at 5-2? Absolutely. So I'm like, I'm not going to sit there and say we have to go 6-1 to feel like the first part of the season is successful. I want to make sure, we win enough games to go to a bowl game, right? And those first 7 are important. I don't disagree with that. I don't really care if it's 5-2 or 6-1. If we're going 3-4 to Boomer's point, that seems like now we're talking about just general.
Well,
problems,
I'll buy into the concept that we'll probably be favored on paper coming into the season against all 7 of those first 7 games. Meaning we're probably better than all 7 of those teams, or that we should be better
on paper. Absolutely.
On paper. And
so.
But I guess everything that we talk about, from recruiting classes and the importance of rankings, we're better than all 7 of them. If it's about development, I look at a team like Colorado. They'll have talent. I have no issue that Colorado have some talent, but is developing players and all the things that we've talked about for 20 months with what Rule, how he's building, we should be better than Colorado. By the way, they're coming here. It should be a crazy environment. And all the BS that we talked about a year ago, that, boy, we played Colorado at the wrong time. Man, that we went into a lion's den down there in Boulder. Well, what do you think it's going to be like in week 2 at night in Memorial Stadium?
Yeah.
And so I guess I just don't buy this, that, well, we can just go 5-2 and, some things can happen.
I don't like the term no excuse, I guess. I mean, to me,
I like the idea of no excuses. I like the idea that these guys should have really high expectations. And these expectations, and Dave, I'm sorry if I'm not going to sweat Rutgers coming into Lincoln. I'm sorry.
You should. They're not bad.
I understand they're not bad.
But we're not supposed to be bad either.
They're also Rutgers coming into Lincoln. And so
Shiano's in year 3.
I get it. I get it.
I'm just saying no excuses
that
implies that there is a consequence to failing 6-1.
You can come up with whatever meaning you want.
There's no consequence.
What I'm telling
Zero.
you. Well, I'm a fan. What consequence am I going to do? I'm not sitting there saying fire the guy halfway through the season.
So I don't understand the term no excuse. It doesn't make any sense.
Then you're thinking too hard about it. Don't think so hard. To me, there's no excuses for this team to not be in bowl eligibility after these first 7 games. And if they, if they aren't, then they'll have to just continue. Look, these expectations will change and move as the season goes on. If we're 7-0, are we relevant at that moment? Sure. But as Coach Rule said, he wants to be relevant as you're going into December and as you're going into the playoffs. So if we go 7-0 and then we go and lose 62-3 to Ohio State, I've seen a year that went that way.
Yes.
If we do that, then guess what? We're still not relevant at the time that he's talking about wanting to be relevant. So all of these goals can change as the season goes on. And if you start 5-2, then you've got more work to do at the end to even get to that bowl game. I don't get any sense listening to Rule right now talk that making a bowl game is the goal. I just don't get that sense.
No, I don't believe it.
There's an expectation. There's an expectation. So if he doesn't make the bowl game, then what? Is there no excuse to not make a bowl game?
I guess I would say, Boomer,
what do we have to do after the season?
Boomer, what has to happen? Question.
I don't like the mentality of fans that you can sit there and say, we have got to win this game this weekend. We have got to beat Colorado. And then if we don't, who are we going to fire then? No, it doesn't work like that. If firing people were the issue, if having consequences, the way that you're saying, Dave, like when we don't hit one goal, consequences is we have to get rid of people and because that's how we fix it. If that was the issue, Nebraska would be the top team in the country the last 20 years. The lack of, Nebraska hasn't had a lack of firing people. Yeah. So we've got to stick with what we're doing. But what I'm saying is
we can fire with the best of them.
What I think is kind of commonplace in Nebraska right now is that we get very excited back in January and February when we sign a bunch of players. Oh, these are the 5-star. This guy's going to be an instant player. This is going to happen. Then we hit August and we pucker up. Wait a minute. Don't put too high of expectations on Dylan. He's still just a freshman. He's just a freshman that's going out there. Okay, well, where was this 8 months ago when he was going to save the world?
I never predicted to go 9-3 to begin with. So I mean,
well, I don't care about predictions either. Although that one
Well,
that was
you-
today, the interesting
Mhm.
one today was the 9-3 guy that has us losing to Purdue, Rutgers, and Ohio State. That's an interesting route to 9-3.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there's different routes to having successful seasons, right? So, like,
Yeah.
to your point, Honky, I mean, we could go 7-0, get blown out by Ohio State. We're crushed as a team. Massive injuries happen versus Ohio State, and Boomer, we are 7-5. We go to a bowl, but we lost our last 5 games, which is not completely unreasonable. Outside of you wouldn't think we should lose to a UCLA team at home, but you have USC, you got Wisconsin, you got Iowa, and one other, right? But we could also go 5-2 to start, which is not excusable. Even though we could there's many ways we could potentially go 5-2. But then we play a competitive game versus Ohio State. We're 5-3, and then we win our last 4, including beating Wisconsin and Iowa and USC on the road. We're 9-3, and I don't know. We're probably relevant at the end of the year, and it looks pretty good. There's a bunch of different ways there. I don't get why the first 7 feels like we have to draw this line in the sand and say, like, oh my God, if we don't start off like a ball of fire, we're in trouble. This team could get better as we go, right, Honky? I mean,
I expect
you do have a young quarterback room that could be a very good quarterback room for Howard Griffith, but it could get better as the year goes on. All of them. Right?
I expect the team to get better no matter what as the season goes on. There's no doubt about that. But I also the no excuses part becomes then, well, we lose game 3. We lose in Northern Iowa. In fact, that was the response I gave to one guy about he goes, go to December 1st and give me one quote about about the season on December 1st. And I look back and I go, wow, who would have thought we'd go to 11-1? Our only loss was Northern Iowa. What a great one, right? But like an excuse thing, if we lose to Northern Iowa in game 3, but we go on to have the successful season, and we lose to Northern Iowa in game 3 because Dylan is a true freshman and makes a whole bunch of mistakes, the excuse to me still would be, well, our only option is that we have to play a true freshman who's going to make a bunch of mistakes right away. I mean, I get laughed out of the room if I say, well, we have a guy Harvard that's played 7 games last year. We're not limited to only playing a true freshman.
He won 7 games or played 7 games.
Played 7 games. I'm just saying we're not limited only. We're not limited only to
we have a national championship quarterback on our roster. Okay.
Yeah, and look, I think that Raiola can be great. He can be great this season. I think there's been a lot of expectations put on him to be great in year 1, and I hope that he's given some grace if he makes mistakes early on. I hope that he's not having to be put in a position to make a whole lot of game-winning plays for us also. I think with a top 20 defense that's coming back and our coordinator leading it and literally, I mean, 18 of our top 20 guys, whatever, on defense. I mean, everyone's back. And if you have that and you have an improved running game, the wide receiver core, Satterfield tonight's talking about how we needed 2 big brothers that, we really felt we need to go out and get 2 guys like that. And that's what Banks and Nair were. That we got 2 guys to come in here. We have both of our top tight ends back. We have running back room that is deep as it's been in a while and healthy. And looking at this going like, I hope that we're not coming down to the end of the game against Indiana and relying on Dylan having to make some great play there, because I hope that we're going to be good enough to just be able to beat a team that we're better than in year 2 of our coach when they're rebuilding in year 1 of their coach.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Abby, I appreciate your cat still on the show because, Honky and I, can get into things a little bit, and
we can get cat.
It's like a calming mechanism for me. I see the cat. I like take a deep breath. It's very nice. Very nice. Just for the fun of outside of Northern Iowa, do we think all other the 6 teams that we play in the first 7 have gone to a bowl in the last 7 years?
I don't understand the question.
Just a question.
No.
Wait, so has UTEP, Colorado, Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana gone to a bowl in the last 7 years?
UTEP's the only one that I don't think has.
Maybe they got some. I feel like they went somewhere. So anyway, it's a great question.
They might have.
It's a.
I guess
on paper, we're way better than all 6 of those. We need to figure out how to get the damn bowl game.
It's funny, like to me, the last 7 seasons are about as relevant to talk about as honestly the blue bloodness of our tradition, our history is when it comes to the season, right? Like we're not going to just go and beat UTEP because we're a top 10 winningest program of all time. That means nothing. But the last 5 seasons also, or the last 7 seasons also mean nothing to me right now because so many of those players have nothing to do with what went on in 2017, 18, 19.
That's fair.
And this coaching staff, like one of the best things I've heard Rule say over and over again this whole offseason is like there's no what do you say? There's no
there's no voodoo doll.
Yeah, there's no voodoo doll. There's no curse. Yeah. That was it. That's what he was saying. There's no curse against us. You have to. Losing football is turning the ball over. And so when you watch like Chasing 3, and I know he gets there's audio of him in practices where he's talking to the team about it's not about curses. It's if you can't stop making the mistakes, you're going to keep losing football games. And it really doesn't matter who you're playing. So we had a text chain earlier today, and Dave, you and Rob went back and forth a little bit on it. And Rob said, we can't, I think it was like, we can't lose to this team or that team.
Rutgers,
no, we can lose to anybody. We
well, it was somebody had given their prediction in the 3 games they had us losing this year.
Rob, stop. Yeah. I don't care. Yes, we can lose to anybody. We can lose to anybody, okay? If you don't play good football, if you turn the ball over, this is really simple. We make things so complicated, and we get into all the analytics and Vegas says this or that. And guess what? If you just don't turn the football over, if you have a sound scheme, if you don't jump off sides and penalize yourself at times that kill you, if you punt to the right side of the field, if you can make a 35-yard field goal, there are so many things that those are the things that we're going to win and lose based off of those. And the question becomes, do you feel like we're at a point under Rule? Does this feel like a team that you think can do that, can do those things well, consistently?
Honky sounds like Kirk Ferentz right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, we joke about Iowa all the time. There was somebody was saying how bad their quarterback. I saw it on Twitter. Somebody was saying how bad their quarterback play was in their last scrimmage.
Can't be worse than what they've had, right?
Well, Hawk guy Matt, he posted something. He said something about the QB and are you worried? And I just responded to him. I'm like, well, do you guys still play defense? Do you still have special teams? Yes. You'll probably be okay. You'll probably be okay if you can keep doing those 2 things. Now, if you're an Iowa fan, you sit there and you go, how much better could they have been if they just had competent QB play, a competent offensive scheme over the last 2 years? Because at some point you're also playing with fire where you're requiring 2 sides of the ball to play at such a insane level. I mean, they can, if they drop off that much in either one of those 2, they could be the team easily sitting at 6-6 and 7-5, losing 3-point games. They have no room to drop off in those 2 because their offense has been so putrid.
Yep, it's true. All right, guys. Anything else on BTN, football in general, life? Let's go to Abby and talk the new show and a little bit about volleyball. Tell us all about Husker. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's the Husker Huddle. Husker Huddle. There it is.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah,
HUSKHER, Husker Huddle.
Yeah, so it'll be, we've kind of talked about it before. It'll be mostly centered around, all centered around women's sports. The first episode, is that what we're calling it? I don't know.
Is that a Snoop song? I can't.
I don't know.
No, that's the next episode.
Sure. Is going to be just like a kind of a volleyball 101, like an intro kind of thing to the program to kind of review who's on the team this year. We've had a lot of, people transfer in and out more, I think, than normal. I think this was kind of an unusual movement type of year for us. And then the things that I've heard a lot of questions about while watching games. So like the different rotations and points, not points, but like different penalties. What is, an out of system play? What is hitting efficiency, attack efficiency, that kind of thing. So it'll just be a general review of that. And so if anybody has questions, feel free to send them to me on Twitter.
Sounds like
I'm
I
on
should
there.
listen to this show so I can better understand.
You
the game
could,
and
yeah.
stuff.
Hopefully. I mean, I hope that's the point to get us started. Our spring game or the red white game is like 9 days and some hours away, which is going to be aired. I think I'm pretty sure on BTN or BTN Plus they'll air it.
Really?
So we'll get our
Wow.
first chance to really see them.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Abby, you were, I don't want to say in attendance at, because it was more of like a Zoom call, but something that actually very much impressed the hell out of me this year was that for not only the Big Ten football media days, which you attended, but also for the volleyball days, which you were on the Zoom call or whatever it was, you asked a question at each one. And both of those answers from Coach Cook and from Coach Rule were used as the sound, like the answers that they gave were used as the sound bites on Big Ten both times. And I never really got to hear the questions because the audio for people asking the questions was almost terrible for Coach Cook. Coach Rule, obviously, you were right there on like the screen and in all of our faces asking the question on there, but maybe you can tell us what was he Cook there and his answer and maybe how he responded if you remember.
Yeah. So my question was just basically that we have seen, the rise of women's sports, specifically volleyball, but in general, women's sports in attendance records, viewership records. In volleyball, we've had an explosion of professional local, I want to say local, but like, United States talent are getting to play volleyball here, not having to go overseas to play professional volleyball. And just kind of asked him like, what would he like to see done? What does he think needs to be done to continue that positive momentum? And I mean, he had a great answer and he just said nothing. They don't have to do anything. It's women's sports is a rocket ship right now. And I think that's such a great answer, but and he was clear, it's all women's sports. And there's a lot of reasons why people are really connecting to women's sports over the last few years. Some of it is because we're getting to know these phenomenal female athletes that are coming up. And because I think there's a lot of things happening in men's sports that people don't really love, for better or worse, that we've talked about it, or you guys have talked about it, the NIL and the transfer portal and all of these, just like the NCAA basically saying there's no rules in men's sports anymore. Oh, there he goes. Has, I think, made women's sports feel a little more, I don't know if he means this, but it almost feels a little more comforting. It feels a lot like something that people can now kind of get into and feel and enjoy, and maybe in a less, like, who knows if this person's going to be around next year. There seems to be a little bit less of that kind of major movement and stuff from women's sports. So that was essentially his answer, is that we don't have to do anything. Women's sports is growing. It's going to continue to grow. And we just have to kind of enjoy the ride while we're on it.
Keep doing what we're doing, essentially.
Yeah. Just keep going. And I mean, it's a shout out to Big Ten that no other conference does media days for anything for volleyball. I don't know how many other conferences do media days for women's basketball. And that's not saying I don't know. I know nobody else does them for volleyball. So that's great for our conference. The Big Ten's always led the way for volleyball, even before we were in the Big Ten. The Big Ten was a volleyball conference and has done so much to promote it. So I think that's a great thing that they're going to continue doing.
I think that's part of women's sports that we've been talking about for the last few years is how do you expect to grow if you don't get some access to them, and you don't give them the exposure. And in the last few years, you've started to see games being played on network TV. You've been seeing ESPN, the flagship network, not just putting games on the Ocho or whatever. So having games in places where you can actually see it, help it out too. It will be interesting moving forward as these sports are now getting bigger, and now there's more money that's coming into that. There's going to be more scholarships coming into some of the sports as well as as we've talked about. It'll be interesting because some of those, you start to see some of the worst traits of the men's sports fall into it. We've seen it a little bit with some of the transfer portal. You think of Husker softball, we've benefited big time the last couple off seasons with big moves that came through the portal, and we've seen it in volleyball as well. Coming and going, and so those are those moments, and even NIL. Those first couple years of it, which I guess we're still only about 3 or 4 years in, but it was some of the female players. Lexi's son, I think, was like probably the top NIL person the first year that we had it. And so, there's some of that trickles into those sports too. And it'll be interesting to see how fans respond to that.
And speaking of NIL, sorry, Rob, don't know if everybody saw this. I tried to retweet it. The entire volleyball team did a commercial for Dick's Sporting Goods. Mm-hmm. There's 2 different commercial spots that include the entire volleyball team, and that's amazing.
That's a big deal.
It's huge.
And not only that, but like I can tell you from a personal standpoint, I'm seeing it develop here with my employer, which they are now.
Oh, Rob, who do you work for?
Well, I wasn't actually going to say their name, Dave. So thank you for that. But
I thought you were.
Can I finish what I'm saying, Dave, without you interrupting me for once? Thank you. My employer itself.
Talk about yourself, Rob. I'll leave.
I'm not talking about myself, Dave. Would you just shut up long enough?
Do I need to go get Al?
Jesus, dude.
I'll go get him.
I'm just trying to say that like people like my employer are getting into the NIL game with even schools like UNC and their volleyball team. And they are sponsoring while they are doing the football team. They're also looking into other women's sports like soccer and volleyball and the softball team. And they're also looking at doing some stuff out there in Lincoln as well. So, I mean, you're seeing companies that are starting to take notice of these women's sports and putting money into that NIL.
Mm. Yeah, it's not going away. At the very least, it's not. And the cat's out of the bag, all those things, it's not going anywhere. And, fans out there, men's sports, women's sports, college sports in general, whether you like it or not, I guess I hate to say it that way, but it's those things have become part of the game now. And it's just, it's the way it is. Hopefully there can be some good legislation over time for what NIL and what the portal will look like. There might be some rule changes over time as things go on, but right now, that's the lay of the land, the rules. So get good at it. Be the team, be the schools that perform best at it. And then what I like to think about with like Rule is how he's treated the players. We haven't had this mass defection of players into the portal. That's a pretty good sign that you have a good culture there. Coach Cook, respectively speaking, I know we've had some players leave, but we're also like, pretty much like the best program in the country, and that's going to happen too. And we have really good players that can't play because they're 3 deep or 4 deep at their position. So, and yet, we seem to be able to manage that pretty well too. So,
absolutely. All right, guys. Anything else we want to talk about? All right, let's get out here with some parting shots, and let's start with newcomer Abby.
Oh, okay. So parting shot, Nebraska, if you haven't seen, was selected as number 1 in the Big Ten volleyball preseason poll. And we have 5 players selected to the preseason all-conference team. 2 were unanimous selection. So should be hopefully a really fun year with another great group of girls. Same group, but yeah, should be fun.
Yeah, let's go win a title, right?
Yeah. No burnt orange. No burnt orange in this.
No burnt orange.
Nope.
This building.
Boomer, let's hear from you.
Well, first off, first parting shot. I know the Olympics are over, but touching on the women's sports angle of it, did some fencing back in college, and my son's into it now. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the U.S. women's fencing team. They did a fine job this Olympics. They won 3 gold medals, or actually 2 gold medals and a silver in women's foil events. And that's a big deal for U.S. fencing.
Yeah,
I mean, since fencing's been around, we've won, I think, 33 medals total. And we actually managed to pull off 4 medals this year. We won a bronze medal in men's fencing as well. So it was just a fine effort. I want to give a shout out to Lee Kiefer and Lauren Scruggs. They did a great job in women's foil. came down to a championship game and just really represented the U.S. well. So just want to give a lesser known sport a little shout out. And the Big Ten is a good fencing conference. So
Yes,
there's a lot of schools here that do actually fence, like Penn State.
You have
very big on it. Yeah. So
Boomer Jr. Potentially trying to get a fencing scholarship. Is that the scheme?
Well, that's possible. Yeah, and if UNL wants to, maybe introduce that, they could. I know they upped the scholarship limits on that. So if they want to bring it in, now's your chance.
Yeah, we're lifting all the scholarship limits. So
absolutely. So
no kidding. All right, it's obviously was popular on TV for NBC for the Olympics. I mean, could at least get Peacock to stream Big Ten fencing.
Oh, absolutely. You should be able to. Yeah.
All right, Rob, what do you got?
Well, I would just like to stick on the theme of the Olympic sports and women's sports at the same time, because the U.S. women basically carried our team in the medal count this year. And had they been their own country, would have been 5th or 6th most winningest nation in all of the Olympics, just our women winning their medals alone. So that was pretty exciting to watch.
Excellent. Cool. All right, Honky, get us out of here.
Gosh, I don't know if I really have one. Stay pumped, Husker fans.
So you're telling me the under is going to hit tonight, Honk? Is that
usually we had the over under at 3 tonight, Honky. I'm impressed for their parting shot.
It's amazing when you're so busy during the days right now. It's hard to prep like usual, but I generally speaking, I don't feel any different right now than I did a few months ago in spring or at the beginning of this offseason. I just feel like we've had about 20 really good months under Rule where he's been making the right moves, been doing the right things, seeing players getting developed. Guys are coming back. We've even withstood an injury, the unexpected things that you don't want to see happen. I'm excited. I'm excited to stop talking about the stuff and watch him play in 17 days. And I think that we're going to have a team that's going to play some really good football and surprise a lot of people, at least the people, if they aren't expecting good things out of this program. I think that they're going to be genuinely surprised. I'm not surprised to see the Howard Griffiths and the people that are seeing this team saying the things that they are. And when I Brett Ciancia is somebody I trust a lot in. He goes out there and he says he thinks that this team's going to go 7-0, and none of that matters ultimately. At the end of the day, they got to go out there and perform and play and do it. But I'm excited. I think as we get to this season here, there's no reason to pucker up. Play your best ball. What are you going to do? Not go to a bowl game? Come on. We've done that 7 times.
It could be worse. Very true. Very true. All right, guys. Enjoyed the show. It was fun. Let's get out of here, and we'll be doing more of these on a regular basis as the countdown to football season starts in earnest. So for now, let's call that another Go Big Redcast.
Go Big Red.
GBR.
A Herd at Sports Network production.